The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Balmoral Castle as Diana Spencer walked nervously toward the main entrance. It was August 1981, just weeks after a fairy tale wedding to Prince Charles, and she was about to spend her first extended holiday with the royal family at their Scottish retreat. The young princess, barely 20 years old, clutched her cardigan tighter as the Highland breeze swept across the estate. Inside the castle, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, was already dressed in his outdoor gear, preparing for his morning routine. At 60 years old, he had established himself as the formidable patriarch of the royal family, known for his direct manner of speaking and unwavering dedication to duty. His reputation preceded him, and Diana had heard whispered warnings from palace staff about his sometimes sharp tongue and impatience with those who couldn't keep up with royal protocol. When Diana first entered the breakfast room that morning, she found herself face to face with the Duke, who was reading his newspapers while sipping his tea. The silence stretched uncomfortably as she hesitated near the doorway, uncertain whether to sit or wait for invitation. Philip looked up from his paper, studying the young woman who had just married his eldest son. "Good morning, Diana," he said simply, folding his newspaper with characteristic precision. "I trust you slept well." Diana nodded, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. She had expected something more formal, perhaps even cold. Instead, there was genuine interest in his pale blue eyes. As she took her seat across from him, Philip began asking about her adjustment to royal life, but not in the rehearsed way that others had questioned her. His questions were practical, almost fatherly. "The photographers can be relentless," he observed, buttering his toast with deliberate movements. "I remember when I first married your mother-in-law. They followed us everywhere, even on our honeymoon. Has Charles given you any useful advice about dealing with them?" Diana found herself relaxing slightly as she shared her experiences with the constant media attention. Philip listened intently, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When she mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the formal dinner parties and state functions, he leaned back in his chair with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "The trick," he said conspiratorially, "is to find something interesting about every person you meet. Even the most boring ambassador usually has one fascinating story if you know how to draw it out of them." He paused, studying her carefully. "You have natural warmth, Diana. Don't let the protocol suffocate that." This conversation became the foundation of something unexpected. Throughout that first week at Balmoral, Philip took it upon himself to guide Diana through the unwritten rules of royal life. Unlike others who simply told her what not to do, he explained the reasoning behind the traditions, helping her understand rather than merely comply. One afternoon, as Diana struggled with a particularly complex piece of royal correspondence, Philip appeared at her side with a cup of tea. Without being asked, he sat down and helped her craft a response that was both appropriately formal and genuinely personal. His handwriting was neat and precise as he made small corrections, explaining each change with patience that surprised even the palace staff who observed from a respectful distance. "Remember," he told her as they worked together, "these letters aren't just formalities. Real people write to you because they believe you care. The challenge is making each response feel personal while maintaining the dignity of the institution." Diana absorbed his lessons eagerly, grateful to have found someone who understood both the burden and the privilege of royal duty. Philip had lived it for over 30 years by then, navigating his own unique position as consort to the monarch while maintaining his own identity and sense of purpose. During the evening walks that became their informal tradition, Philip would share stories from his own early days in the royal family. He spoke of his struggles to find his place, his determination to modernize certain aspects of royal life, and his deep respect for the institution they both served. Diana began to see past his sometimes stern exterior to the thoughtful man beneath. "You know," Philip said one evening as they paused by the loch, watching the last light of day reflect on the water, "when I first married Elizabeth, I thought I understood what royal life would be like. I was completely wrong." He turned to look at Diana directly. "The hardest part isn't the public duties or even the media attention. It's learning how to be yourself while serving something larger than yourself. These words resonated deeply with Diana, who had been struggling with exactly that balance. In Philip, she found not just a father-in-law, but a mentor who understood the unique challenges she faced. His guidance during those early weeks at Balmoral would prove invaluable as she navigated the complex world she had married into. The other family members began to notice the easy rapport developing between Diana and Philip. Queen Elizabeth observed their conversations with quiet approval, recognizing that her husband was providing exactly the kind of practical support that Diana needed. Charles, initially surprised by his father's attention to his new wife, soon came to appreciate how Philip's guidance was helping Diana settle into her role. By the end of that first summer at Balmoral, Diana had transformed from the nervous young bride who had arrived weeks earlier. She carried herself with more confidence, spoke more freely at dinner, and had even begun to contribute her own ideas during family discussions about various charitable causes and royal engagements. Philip, for his part, had discovered something unexpected in his new daughter-in-law. Her genuine compassion and intuitive understanding of people impressed him, and he began to see qualities in her that reminded him of his own wife's best characteristics. Diana possessed a natural ability to connect with others that could serve the royal family well, if properly channeled and supported. The foundation of their relationship, built during those quiet mornings over breakfast and evening walks by the loch, would sustain them both through the challenges that lay ahead. Neither could have predicted how crucial this bond would become in the years to come. As Diana faced the pressures of public life, and Philip watched his son's marriage begin to unravel. As autumn approached, and the family prepared to return to their various residences, Philip took Diana aside for one final conversation. They stood in the same spot where she had first arrived, nervous and uncertain weeks before. "You've done well this summer," he told her simply. "Remember what we've discussed, and don't let anyone convince you that your instincts are wrong. Trust yourself, Diana, but never forget that you're part of something larger now." Diana nodded, understanding that this was more than just encouragement. It was Philip's way of telling her that she had his support, his confidence, and, perhaps most importantly, his respect. As she prepared to face her first official autumn of royal duties, she carried with her not just the practical lessons he had taught, but the knowledge that she had an ally in one of the most influential members of the royal family. The crisp London autumn of 1982 brought new challenges for Diana as she settled into her role as Princess of Wales. The initial euphoria of her wedding had given way to the reality of constant public scrutiny and the demanding schedule of royal duties. It was during this period that her relationship with Prince Philip deepened from mentorship into something resembling genuine friendship. Diana had given birth to Prince William in June, and the experience of becoming a mother had changed her perspective on many things. She found herself turning to Philip more frequently for advice, not just about royal protocol, but about balancing personal life with public duty. Philip, who had raised 4 children while supporting the Queen through decades of royal obligations, understood these challenges intimately. One particular afternoon in October, Diana arrived at Buckingham Palace for what was supposed to be a brief meeting about upcoming Christmas arrangements. She found Philip in his study, surrounded by correspondence related to his numerous patronages. He looked up as she entered, immediately noticing the tension in her shoulders and the slight tremor in her hands. "Sit down," he said without preamble, pushing aside his papers. "You look like you haven't slept properly in weeks." Diana sank gratefully into the leather chair across from his desk. The past months had indeed been exhausting. Between caring for baby William, fulfilling her royal engagements, and dealing with increasing media pressure, she felt stretched beyond her limits. The press had begun scrutinizing every aspect of her appearance and behavior, creating a level of stress she hadn't anticipated. "They're watching everything I do," she confided to Philip, her voice barely above a whisper. "How I hold William, what I wear, whether I'm smiling enough or too much. I feel like I can't breathe sometimes." Philip set down his pen completely and leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same careful attention he had shown during their first breakfast at Balmoral. His expression was thoughtful rather than judgmental, and Diana felt some of the tension leave her shoulders just from being truly heard. "I want to tell you something," Philip said after a long moment. "Something I've never told anyone else in the family." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "When Elizabeth became queen, I thought I knew what that would mean for our family. I was wrong about almost everything." Diana listened intently as Philip shared memories she had never heard before. He spoke of watching his wife transform from the young woman he had married into the monarch she needed to become, and how that transformation had affected their entire family. He described sleepless nights worrying about his children growing up in the public eye, and the constant pressure to be perfect while remaining human. "The media attention you're experiencing now," he continued, "it's unlike anything we faced in the early years. Television has changed everything, made the scrutiny more immediate and more invasive. But the fundamental challenge remains the same. How do you serve the public while protecting what matters most to you?" Over the following weeks, Philip began inviting Diana to accompany him on certain engagements, particularly those related to young people and education. He had observed her natural ease with children and her genuine interest in social issues, and he wanted to help her develop these strengths within the framework of royal duty. Their first joint engagement was a visit to a youth center in East London. Diana was nervous about appearing alongside the Duke, worried that she might embarrass herself or say something inappropriate. Philip sensed her anxiety as they traveled to the venue together. "Remember what I told you about finding something interesting in everyone you meet," he said as their car approached the center. "These young people have stories to tell. Your job isn't to have all the answers. It's to listen and to care genuinely." Diana watched carefully as Philip interacted with the teenagers they met. His approach was direct, but never condescending, and he asked questions that drew out thoughtful responses rather than polite platitudes. When her turn came to speak with the young people, Diana found herself naturally following his example, asking about their interests and challenges rather than simply making small talk. After the visit, as they drove back to the palace, Philip offered his assessment with characteristic directness. "You did well today. Better than well, actually. You have something that can't be taught: genuine empathy. Don't let anyone train that out of you." These joint engagements became more frequent as Philip recognized Diana's potential to bring a fresh perspective to royal work. He began including her in planning sessions for various events, valuing her input on how to make occasions more meaningful and engaging for the people they were meant to serve. During one such planning meeting in November, they were discussing arrangements for a reception honoring military families. Diana suggested incorporating elements that would make the children present feel included rather than simply tolerated. Philip listened as she outlined her ideas, then added several practical suggestions that would make her vision feasible within royal protocol. "You're thinking like a mother now," he observed, not as criticism, but as recognition. "That's not a weakness in this role. It's a strength if you use it wisely." Diana began to understand that Philip was teaching her something crucial about royal life: the importance of bringing your authentic self to public service while respecting the traditions and expectations that came with the role. He helped her see that she didn't need to suppress her natural warmth and compassion to be an effective royal, but rather that these qualities could enhance her effectiveness if properly channeled. Their conversations during this period often took place during walks through the palace gardens or quiet moments between official duties. Philip shared insights about navigating palace politics, dealing with difficult advisors, and maintaining personal relationships under public scrutiny. Diana, in turn, brought fresh perspectives that sometimes challenged Philip's own assumptions about royal work. One conversation that particularly stood out occurred on a foggy December morning as they walked through St. James's Park. Diana had been struggling with criticism about her fashion choices, with newspapers alternately praising and condemning her style decisions. She felt caught between wanting to express her personality and needing to meet royal expectations. "My dear," Philip said, stopping to face her directly, "you're trying to please everyone, and that's impossible. The key is to understand why certain standards exist and Then find ways to honor them while remaining true to yourself. He paused, watching a pair of swans glide across the lake. Elizabeth learned this lesson early. You dress appropriately for the occasion and the role, but you don't disappear behind the clothes. This advice proved invaluable as Diana developed her distinctive style that would eventually influence fashion worldwide while always remaining appropriate for her royal duties. Philip helped her understand that her choices mattered not just for personal expression, but as part of the royal family's public image. As 1982 drew to a close, Diana's confidence had grown noticeably. Palace staff observed that she moved through her duties with greater assurance, and her public appearances showed increasing polish without losing the spontaneous warmth that had first captured public attention. Much of this growth could be traced to the steady guidance and genuine support she had received from her father-in-law. Philip, meanwhile, had discovered in Diana someone who challenged him to think differently about royal service. Her questions and perspectives often forced him to reconsider established ways of doing things, and he found himself energized by their collaboration on various projects. The relationship between them had evolved beyond the initial mentor-student dynamic into something more complex and valuable, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to effective royal service. They had developed an easy communication style that allowed them to work together efficiently while maintaining the appropriate boundaries of their family relationship. As the new year approached, both Diana and Philip looked forward to continuing their work together, neither fully realizing how their strong foundation would be tested by the challenges that lay ahead. The spring of 1984 marked a turning point in Diana's relationship with Prince Philip, as their bond deepened through shared challenges and mutual support during increasingly difficult times. Diana was pregnant with her second child, and the strain of constant media attention combined with growing tensions in her marriage to Charles had begun to take a visible toll on her well-being. Philip had always been observant, but his years of experience had taught him to read the subtle signs of distress that others might miss. During a family gathering at Windsor Castle in April, he noticed Diana's unusual quietness and the way she seemed to withdraw from conversations that would normally engage her completely. Her usual bright laughter was absent, replaced by polite smiles that never quite reached her eyes. After dinner that evening, Philip found Diana standing alone on one of the castle's terraces, looking out over the grounds in the gathering dusk. She didn't seem to hear his approach, lost in thoughts that appeared to be anything but pleasant. When he cleared his throat softly, she turned with a startled expression that quickly shifted to relief when she recognized him. "I needed some air," she said simply, wrapping her arms around herself despite the mild evening temperature. Philip joined her at the stone balustrade, following her gaze across the manicured gardens. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes before he spoke, his voice carrying the gentleness that Diana had come to associate with their private conversations. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I used to come out here when the children were small, and Elizabeth was particularly busy with state affairs. Sometimes the weight of it all felt overwhelming, and I needed to remember that there was a world beyond palace walls and royal duties." Diana turned to look at him, surprised by this rare glimpse into his personal struggles. Philip rarely spoke about his own vulnerabilities, preferring to focus on practical solutions and moving forward. His willingness to share this moment of honesty felt like a gift. "How did you manage it?" she asked quietly. "The pressure, the expectations, the feeling that everyone is watching and judging every decision you make." Philip considered her question carefully before answering. "I learned that perfectionism is the enemy of effectiveness," he said finally. "You can't control what others think or say about you, but you can control whether you're acting with integrity and genuine purpose. The rest is just noise." Over the following weeks, Philip made a point of checking on Diana more frequently, often finding small excuses to spend time with her. He would arrive at her sitting room with reports that needed her input, or invite her to accompany him to inspect preparations for upcoming events. These moments together gave him opportunities to gauge her mood and offer support when needed. During one such visit in May, Philip found Diana struggling with correspondence from the public. The volume of letters she received had grown exponentially, and many contained deeply personal stories of hardship and requests for help. Diana felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of responding appropriately to such raw human need. "I want to help all of them," she told Philip, gesturing at the stacks of letters covering her desk. "But I don't know how. Some of these stories are heartbreaking, and I feel like anything I write back will be inadequate." Philip spent the next hour helping Diana develop a system for handling her correspondence more effectively. He showed her how to identify letters that required personal responses versus those that could be handled with carefully crafted form letters. More importantly, he helped her understand that the act of responding with genuine care was itself valuable, even when she couldn't solve the underlying problems. "You underestimate the power of acknowledgement," he told her as they worked together. "Sometimes people just need to know that someone in a position of influence has heard their story and cares about their situation. That alone can make a significant difference." As Diana's pregnancy progressed, Philip became increasingly protective of her well-being, often running interference with demanding courtiers or overly ambitious event planners who wanted to schedule too many engagements. He had learned from experience how important it was to maintain reasonable boundaries, particularly during vulnerable periods. When Prince Harry was born in September 1984, Philip was among the first family members to visit Diana in the hospital. He brought flowers from his own gardens at Sandringham and spent an hour simply talking with her about everything except royal duties and public expectations. Diana later told friends that his visit had been exactly what she needed during an emotionally complex time. The autumn months brought new challenges as Diana began to find her voice on issues that mattered deeply to her. She had become increasingly interested in causes related to homelessness, mental health, and support for vulnerable populations. However, some palace advisors worried that her approach was too informal and might be inappropriate for a member of the royal family. Philip found himself in the position of advocate for Diana's evolving style of royal engagement. During a particularly heated discussion with senior courtiers about her wish to visit a hospice for AIDS patients, Philip argued forcefully for supporting her initiative. "The princess has excellent instincts about connecting with people who need support," he stated firmly to the assembled advisors. "Rather than trying to constrain her natural compassion, we should be finding ways to channel it effectively within appropriate parameters." His support gave Diana the confidence to pursue engagements that might have been deemed too controversial by more conservative palace officials. Philip helped her prepare for these visits by discussing potential challenges and appropriate responses, but he never suggested that she should avoid difficult or emotionally demanding situations. One particularly meaningful collaboration occurred when they planned a joint visit to a center supporting young people aging out of foster care. Philip's experience with youth development programs combined with Diana's intuitive understanding of emotional needs resulted in an engagement that was both professionally effective and personally meaningful for the young people they met. During their preparation for this visit, Diana confided to Philip her growing frustration with what she saw as the excessive formality of many royal engagements. She felt that too much time was spent on ceremonial aspects that created distance between the royal family and the people they were meant to serve. "Sometimes I wonder if we're just going through motions," she said during one of the planning sessions. "The people we meet are polite and respectful, but I can see that they're nervous and uncomfortable. How can we really help anyone if we can't connect authentically?" Philip listened carefully to her concerns, recognizing both the validity of her observations and the potential challenges of implementing the changes she envisioned. "You're not wrong about the barriers that formality can create," he acknowledged. "The question is how to maintain appropriate dignity while allowing for genuine human connection." Together, they began developing strategies for making royal engagements more meaningful and less intimidating for the people involved. Philip's experience with protocol provided the framework, while Diana's emotional intelligence suggested ways to create warmer, more authentic interactions within those boundaries. Their collaboration during this period strengthened their relationship considerably. Diana came to rely on Philip not just as a mentor, but as a true ally who understood her goals and supported her efforts to expand the impact of royal service. Philip, meanwhile, found in Diana a refreshing perspective that challenged him to reconsider assumptions about royal work that he had held for decades. By the end of 1984, their partnership had become one of the most effective working relationships within the royal family. Palace staff noted the easy communication between them and the successful outcomes of their joint initiatives. More importantly, Diana's confidence in her role had grown significantly, supported by Philip's steady guidance and genuine belief in her abilities. Neither of them realized at the time how crucial this foundation of trust and mutual respect would become as they faced even greater challenges in the years ahead. Their relationship had evolved from initial mentorship through collaborative partnership, creating a bond that would prove remarkably resilient in the face of future difficulties. The years between 1987 and 1990 tested the strength of Diana and Philip's relationship as the princess faced increasingly serious personal challenges while maintaining her growing public profile. The cracks in Diana's marriage to Charles had become impossible to ignore, and the media speculation about their relationship created additional pressure on an already fragile situation. Philip found himself in an extraordinarily difficult position during this period. As Charles's father, he felt a natural loyalty to his son, but as Diana's mentor and friend, he could see the genuine pain she was experiencing. His approach during these troubled times revealed the depth of his character and the sincerity of his care for Diana's welfare. One particularly difficult evening in early 1988, Diana arrived at Buckingham Palace for a family dinner looking unusually pale and drawn. Throughout the meal, she participated in conversation only when directly addressed, and Philip noticed that she barely touched her food. After dinner, instead of joining the others in the drawing room, she quietly excused herself and stepped out onto the palace gardens. Philip waited a few minutes before following her outside. He found her sitting on a stone bench near the rose garden, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she stared at the ground. The vulnerability in her posture reminded him of the nervous young woman who had first arrived at Balmoral years earlier. But this was different. This was the exhaustion of someone who had been fighting internal battles for too long. "Diana," he said gently as he approached, not wanting to startle her from her thoughts. She looked up with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know I should go back inside. Everyone will wonder where I am." "Let them wonder," Philip replied, settling onto the bench beside her. Sometimes the most important conversations happen away from drawing rooms and formal dinners. What followed was one of the most honest conversations they had ever shared. Diana spoke haltingly about her feelings of isolation, her struggle with depression, and her growing sense that she was failing at everything that mattered most to her. Philip listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions, but mostly just providing the steady presence that Diana desperately needed. "I feel like I'm drowning," she admitted at one point. "Everyone sees the princess who opens hospitals and attends galas, but inside I feel like I'm disappearing. I don't know who I am anymore outside of all these expectations." Philip's response surprised her with its directness. "You're someone who cares deeply about people who are suffering," he said firmly. "You're someone who brings light into difficult places. You're someone who makes children feel important and valued. Those things aren't roles you play, Diana. They're who you are." His words, spoken with quiet conviction, seemed to anchor her in a way that polite reassurances never could. Philip continued, "The challenge you're facing isn't about being a princess. It's about being human in circumstances that often seem designed to make authentic humanity impossible." This conversation marked the beginning of a new phase in their relationship. Philip began making himself more available to Diana during her darkest periods, often appearing at precisely the moments when she most needed support. He had an uncanny ability to sense when she was struggling, sometimes calling or visiting even when she hadn't reached out for help. During one particularly difficult week in 1989, when tabloid coverage of her marriage had become especially intrusive and hurtful. Philip arranged for Diana to accompany him on a series of engagements that would take them away from London and the immediate media pressure. He planned their schedule to include activities he knew she found meaningful, including visits to children's charities and meetings with young people pursuing innovative community projects. Throughout these engagements, Philip made a point of highlighting Diana's contributions and insights, ensuring that she received credit for her ideas and observations. He watched as her confidence gradually returned over the course of several days, and he was pleased to see her beginning to smile genuinely again by the end of their travels. "You needed reminding of what you do well," he told her on their journey back to London. "Sometimes when we're overwhelmed by criticism, we forget our strengths. I wanted you to see yourself through the eyes of people whose lives you've touched positively." Philip's support during this period extended beyond emotional encouragement. He began taking a more active role in protecting Diana from some of the more unreasonable demands placed on her by palace officials and event organizers. He used his considerable influence to ensure that her schedule remained manageable and that she had adequate time for rest and recovery between demanding engagements. When some courtiers suggested that Diana should reduce her involvement with AIDS-related charities due to ongoing public controversy about the disease, Philip spoke out strongly in support of her continued work. He argued that the royal family's role included providing leadership on difficult social issues, and that Diana's compassionate approach was exactly what was needed. "The princess has shown exceptional courage in addressing a crisis that affects real families and real communities," he told the assembled advisors with unmistakable authority. "Rather than retreating from controversy, we should be supporting her efforts to bring attention and resources to people who desperately need both." His public support for Diana's charitable work had significant impact beyond the immediate decision about AIDS-related activities. It sent a clear message throughout the royal household that Diana's compassionate approach to public service had the backing of one of the most senior members of the family. During this same period, Philip began including Diana in more sophisticated discussions about the modernization of the monarchy. He had long believed that the royal family needed to evolve with changing times, and he recognized that Diana's natural connection with contemporary British society gave her valuable insights into public expectations and needs. These conversations often took place during their regular walks through various royal properties. Diana would share observations about public reactions to royal activities, while Philip would explain the historical context and constitutional considerations that shaped royal decision-making. Together, they explored ways to honor tradition while remaining relevant and accessible to modern audiences. One conversation that particularly influenced Diana's later development occurred during a walk through the grounds at Sandringham in late 1989. They had been discussing the challenge of balancing public service with personal authenticity when Philip made an observation that would stay with Diana for years to come. "The most effective members of this family have always been those who found ways to serve the institution while remaining true to their own values and instincts," he said thoughtfully. "My mother-in-law, the Queen Mother, managed this beautifully. She never compromised her essential warmth and humor, but she understood how to channel those qualities in service of something larger than herself." Diana absorbed this lesson deeply, and it became part of her approach to royal duties in the years that followed. She began to see her natural empathy and emotional intelligence not as challenges to overcome, but as assets to develop and use effectively within the framework of royal service. By 1990, despite the ongoing difficulties in her personal life, Diana had established herself as one of the most effective and popular members of the royal family. Much of her success could be traced to the steady guidance and unwavering support she had received from Philip during her most challenging periods. Philip, meanwhile, had discovered that his relationship with Diana brought new meaning to his own role within the royal family. Her fresh perspectives and genuine compassion had reinvigorated his own commitment to public service, and he found their collaboration personally and professionally rewarding. As they faced the uncertain years ahead, neither could predict the full extent of the challenges that lay before them. However, the foundation of trust, respect, and genuine affection they had built during these difficult times would prove strong enough to sustain them through even greater trials that awaited in the decade to come. The final chapter of Diana and Philip's unique relationship unfolded against the backdrop of the most turbulent period in modern royal history. The early 1990s brought the public breakdown of Diana's marriage, intense media scrutiny, and ultimately the formal separation from Charles in 1992. Throughout this devastating period, Philip's steadfast support for Diana remained unwavering, even as he navigated the complex loyalties within his own family. When news of Charles and Diana's separation became public in December 1992, Philip was one of the first family members to reach out to Diana personally. Rather than the formal communication she might have expected, he arranged to meet her privately at Kensington Palace, away from the watchful eyes of courtiers and media representatives. Diana was preparing for what she assumed would be a difficult conversation about her future role and responsibilities when Philip arrived at her sitting room on a gray December morning. Instead of the stern patriarch she had worried about facing, she found the same supportive figure who had guided her through previous challenges, though his expression carried the weight of the family crisis they were all experiencing. "I want you to understand something clearly," Philip said without preamble as they settled into comfortable chairs by the window. "Your value to this family and to the country doesn't diminish because your marriage to Charles hasn't worked out as everyone hoped." His direct approach, as always, cut through the uncertainty that had been plaguing Diana for weeks. She had been consumed with worry about losing her role, her patronages, and her connection to the charitable work that had become central to her identity. "The work you've done, the relationships you've built with the public, the genuine difference you've made in people's lives," Philip continued. "Those things matter far more than any personal difficulties you and Charles are experiencing. I want to make sure you don't lose sight of that." Over the following months, as Diana adjusted to her new status as a separated member of the royal family, Philip became an even more crucial source of guidance and support. He helped her navigate the complex negotiations about her future role, always advocating for arrangements that would allow her to continue the charitable work she found most meaningful. When some palace advisors suggested that Diana should step back from high-profile engagements to avoid overshadowing other family members, Philip argued forcefully against any restrictions that would prevent her from using her gifts effectively. He understood better than most how much Diana's sense of purpose was tied to her ability to help others, and he recognized the damage that enforced isolation might cause. "The princess has developed unprecedented connections with the British people," he stated firmly during one particularly tense meeting with senior courtiers. Attempting to diminish her public role would not only be wasteful of her talents, but potentially damaging to the monarchy's reputation for fairness and compassion. Philip's influence extended beyond formal discussions about Diana's status. He continued their tradition of regular conversations, providing the steady presence that helped anchor her during an extremely volatile period. These talks often took place during walks through Hyde Park or quiet afternoons at various royal residences, away from the intense scrutiny that surrounded most of Diana's activities. During one such conversation in early 1993, Diana confided her fears about the future and her uncertainty about how to rebuild her life as a single woman while maintaining her royal responsibilities. Philip listened carefully before offering perspective drawn from his decades of experience with institutional change and personal adaptation. "You're in a unique position now," he told her thoughtfully. "You have the freedom to define your own approach to public service without having to coordinate with Charles or conform to expectations about how royal couples should operate. That's challenging, but it's also an opportunity." This observation proved prophetic as Diana began to develop her distinctive style of humanitarian work in the years that followed. Free from the constraints of a troubled marriage, she was able to pursue causes and approaches that felt most authentic to her, often with Philip's quiet support and practical advice. One of the most significant examples of their continued collaboration occurred in 1996, when Diana became involved with the campaign to ban landmines. The cause was controversial, with some government officials worrying that royal involvement in such a politically sensitive issue might be inappropriate. Diana sought Philip's counsel before committing fully to the campaign. "This is exactly the kind of work you should be doing," he told her without hesitation. "You have the profile to bring international attention to a humanitarian crisis that affects innocent civilians, particularly children. The fact that it might make some politicians uncomfortable is irrelevant compared to the potential to save lives." Philip's endorsement gave Diana confidence to pursue the landmine campaign with full commitment, and her subsequent work in this area became one of her most lasting contributions to humanitarian causes. His ability to see past political concerns to the fundamental human impact of the issue reflected the practical wisdom he had developed over decades of public service. As Diana's public profile continued to evolve through the mid-1990s, Philip remained one of her most reliable advisors on matters both personal and professional. He helped her think through decisions about which patronages to maintain, how to handle media relationships, and how to balance her desire for greater personal freedom with her ongoing royal responsibilities. Their relationship during this period demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of external pressures. Despite the family tensions surrounding Diana's separation and eventual divorce from Charles, Philip never allowed these circumstances to affect his personal support for Diana or his respect for her contributions to royal service. When Diana's famous Panorama interview aired in November 1995, Philip was among the family members most concerned about its potential consequences. However, rather than criticizing Diana's decision to speak publicly about her experiences, he focused on helping her manage the aftermath and plan for her future. "What's done is done," he told her during a private conversation shortly after the interview's broadcast. "The question now is how to move forward constructively. You've been honest about your struggles, and many people will respect that honesty. The challenge is channeling the public response into positive outcomes." Even after Diana's divorce was finalized in August 1996, Philip maintained regular contact with her, recognizing that she would need ongoing support as she established her new identity as a divorced mother and independent public figure. He understood that her success in this transition would ultimately benefit not just Diana herself, but her sons and the royal family as a whole. Their final significant conversation took place in the spring of 1997, just months before Diana's death. She had been reflecting on how much her life had changed since their first meeting at Balmoral 16 years earlier, and she wanted Philip to understand how much his guidance had meant to her throughout her most difficult periods. "I don't think I could have survived these years without knowing that I had your support," she told him during what would be their last private conversation. "You helped me understand that I could be both royal and human, both dutiful and authentic. That made all the difference." Philip, characteristically uncomfortable with emotional displays, simply nodded and squeezed her hand gently. "You found your own way, Diana. I just helped remove a few obstacles along the path." When news of Diana's death in Paris reached Balmoral on August 31st, 1997, Philip was among those most deeply affected by the loss. He had watched her grow from an uncertain young bride into one of the most influential figures in contemporary royal history, and he understood better than most what her death meant for the monarchy and for the millions of people she had touched through her humanitarian work. In the days following her death, Philip played a crucial role in planning Diana's funeral and supporting her sons through their grief. His steady presence during those difficult days reflected the same qualities that had made him such an important figure in Diana's life: practical wisdom, genuine compassion, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right regardless of personal cost. The legacy of Diana and Philip's relationship extended far beyond their personal bond. Together, they had demonstrated how the royal family could evolve and adapt while maintaining its essential character. Diana's humanitarian work, supported and encouraged by Philip's guidance, had shown new possibilities for royal service in the modern world. Philip's willingness to mentor and support Diana even when it meant challenging established protocols and defending controversial decisions, reflected his deep understanding of the monarchy's need to remain relevant and compassionate in changing times. Their partnership had created a model for how traditional institutions could embrace innovation while honoring their fundamental purposes. Years later, Philip would occasionally speak privately about Diana's impact on his own understanding of royal duty. Her compassion and intuitive connection with people in need had reminded him of the human dimension that should always be at the heart of public service. In supporting her, he had rediscovered aspects of his own commitment to making a meaningful difference in the world. The warm bond between Princess Diana and the Duke of Edinburgh had begun with practical mentorship, but had evolved into something much more significant. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection that transcended the formal boundaries of royal protocol. Their relationship demonstrated that even within the constraints of institutional life, authentic human connection and meaningful friendship were not only possible, but essential for effective service to others.